Hey everybody, welcome to the Mother Figures podcast. I'm Caitlin Darkangelo, founder and co-owner of FIGR, Midwestern wife, and girl mom. I'm a dual certified pregnancy and postpartum trainer, majored in exercise science from the University of Michigan, earned my master in management degree from Duke University, and have been coaching in the fitness industry for over a decade. This podcast dives into all things pregnancy and postpartum fitness, especially in how to navigate strength and intensity training in these seasons. Whether you're in it yourself, trying to get pregnant, or coaching this population, you're in the right place. I'm excited to share personal experiences, client stories, guest interviews, and evidence-based strategies to give you the guidance, insights, and clarity needed to navigate these seasons with confidence. And with that, let's get rolling. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Mother Figures podcast. Today is going to be a Q&A style podcast. So I had some great questions come in from clients and Instagram followers and stuff this past week and wanted to elaborate a little bit on each of them because I thought they were all very pertinent to everybody. I'm sure it's pretty common questions and just really unique answers or responses to them that I wanted to be able to dive a little bit deeper into. So we'll just get right into it. The first question revolves around return to run timelines in the postpartum period. So this was a client who was following my FIGR postpartum program. She started the app program at 4 weeks postpartum. She was already doing longer walks and housework. So she skipped over the weeks 1 through 3, which is the rest phase. It involves like 5 to 15 minute walks, 10 minutes of stretching, and a few minutes of breath work per day. And so she personally felt like she was kind of past that phase or like didn't really need to get into the rest piece of it. So she started at week 4, which kind of gets into some of the body weight movements, exercises like body squats, good mornings, things like that. A little bit more deeper, deep core connection stuff, and then about 20-minute walk. So it's not wrong to skip over that phase, but that's just where her body felt like she wanted to start, was at the 4-week point instead of right from the beginning of the program. When she started week 4 of the program at 4 weeks postpartum without doing anything prior to, she started to feel a little bit more swollen, a little bit, that soreness feeling in the pelvic floor that we kind of feel in the beginning few weeks when she started to add more of those more structured activities into her day versus just kind of daily life activities. And so we talked about it in the app. I'm there for you guys in the app anytime. So I love getting these kind of personal questions or concerns, and we can navigate things, like that together. So we collaboratively decided that she should start back from the beginning. So she went back to week 1 and went through that full 3-week rest phase, even though she was already doing longer walks and, all that stuff. And so long story short, after she went through the 3 weeks of the rest phase and then she got back to that point, now she's feeling at a point in her postpartum journey. She's now 8 weeks postpartum and feeling really solid after going through the rest phase and then after going through the first 4 weeks of structured activity as well. So all of that as background, she is now 8 weeks postpartum. She is athletic. She was in the fitness, realm before getting pregnant. So she has a fitness history. She is feeling very eager, both mentally and physically, to start the running progression in the supplemental section of the app. So within the app, I have the program that you can click start and it comes up on your to-do list. And then I also have a different area in the app where I have a running progression. I have deep core videos. I have like a kind of a different library, almost like Netflix, where you can just like click randomly and add stuff into your program as well. So this running progression is what starts being programmed in the FIGR postpartum program at week 12, but she's at week 8 and she's like, I just really want to start doing that. Like, what are your thoughts around that? So first is like kind of all that background information. So like, how are you feeling up into this point? So we're at 8 weeks postpartum. The running program or running stuff doesn't start until week 12, but that does not mean that you cannot start running until week 12. The reason I program running to start at week 12 is just because the general population on average in general needs that 12 weeks sometimes, again, this is all individualized, but in general, to adjust to lifestyle changes with a new baby, to build up the strength foundation that your body needs to be able to get into that impact stuff. We have a lot of impact drills that I program between week 6 and week 12 that are prepping your body for leaving the ground, coming back to the ground, getting your cardio and fitness capacity built up enough, and then also allowing the joints to reacclimate as well, because we probably haven't ran, if not at least for the last 8 weeks, but also into pregnancy. Like, when's the last time you ran during pregnancy? Some take it out very early in the first trimester. So we want to give our joints, our ankles, our knees, our hips, the stability and the strength back as well. So it's not just a pelvic floor thing, although that is a big component of it. That is the biggest culprit of symptoms, is incontinence while running. So we're trying to build up the pelvic floor's capacity, but we're also trying to build up our full body strength, our fitness endurance, and our joints, and reacclimating our whole body to this high impact repetitive kind of motion. So the FIGR postpartum program starts running progression at week 12, but what if you feel good prior to? What would I recommend for that case? And what she had naturally started to do is actually what I was going to recommend her to do. So every day there is a structured, I guess not every day, a few times a week in the program. Oh, I just sucked on air or something. There are walks. We go up to 30-minute walks, so anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes a few times a week. And so I actually did the same exact thing a few weeks ago when I was in the same boat of that 8 to 12 week period where your body's feeling really solid from a foundation perspective and you're just eager to try a little bit of running. I would start adding in 10-second jogs within my 15-minute walk every few minutes or so, just to see if my body reacted in any way. So things I'm looking for. This is a whole podcast episode. I went into the what to look for. I think it was episode 30, maybe two or three episodes ago, of what to look for symptom-wise. So we're looking for, obviously, signs of incontinence or feelings of heaviness down in the pelvic floor area. But we're also looking for joint achiness. We're looking for our core stability, maybe back pinching, things that are showing us that our alignment is off, or maybe our body just isn't prepared for that high of a demand of exercise on the current state of our body. So starting with literally just 10 seconds of jogging and just walking for another 3 to 4 minutes, 10-second jog, 3 to 4 minutes, and just seeing how that feels in the natural walks that are programmed within the workouts already. And then if that feels good, I would keep building up that jog piece within the walks, and maybe we get up to a minute or so, just testing it. So that would be one recommendation if you wanted to start getting into running prior to, if you are a FIGR postpartum client, prior to that run progression starting. The second option is if you want, so those progressions are already naturally started at week 12 in the program, but you could go into the supplemental section and add them in earlier if you'd want to. So with this client at 8 weeks, maybe she adds the running progression at 8 weeks and just tests her body to see if that's appropriate for those 4 weeks until it's actually naturally programmed into the workouts. And then once they do come up in the workouts starting at week 12, she already has 4 weeks worth of testing phase done. So then when we get to week 12, maybe we can start testing the pace that she goes. Maybe she can push a little bit harder in those 1-to-1 intervals, or maybe she can try some more incline to make it a little bit more challenging. Just because we've had 4 weeks of that same, structure, when we do actually have it in the programming, then she can push the intensity piece a little bit more. So those would be my 2 recommendations. If you feel, well, this is for FIGR postpartum specifically, but also if you're not doing FIGR postpartum and you want to just get back to running, starting in very small increments. So whether or not you have a good running history, fitness history, you probably will feel eager prior to that 12-week point. But I still strongly recommend at least 2 to 3 weeks of impact training before running. So heel slams, plate hops, things that are just getting your body comfortable leaving the ground. and starting with walk run intervals, which is what I was trying to get to. Instead of just being like, oh, let me go see if I can run 3 miles. Like, that's not how postpartum return to run works. We have to structure it in a progressive way so that we are overloading the pelvic floor. We know that your body can probably take it, especially if you have a history of running. Again, there's the joint considerations and muscle strength and all that too. But we need to make sure that your core and pelvic floor get reacclimated, not just like thrown into the fire when it comes to something like running. So starting with like really high rest or work to rest ratios, or low work to rest. So like maybe it's, that 10 seconds of work with 4 minutes of walk. Maybe it's 1 minute of a run with 3 minutes of a walk. Whatever you feel is appropriate. My workout program starts with 1 minute on, 1 minute off 10 times for like 20-minute segment. So that's where we start at the week 12 point. But if you're starting prior to week 12, which again is just generally that time frame that it might take to build up enough strength, enough endurance, enough fitness capacity, get the lifestyle factor and sleep and nutrition all dialed in by that point. Again, that's a general time frame. There actually was a research study that recommended that 12 weeks is when it is appropriate to start return to run, but we've seen from clinical evidence in the last few years or few months, especially high level runners getting back to running in like week 3 to 4. So there's a huge range of comfortability here, but in general, still starting with those walk to run intervals, not just sending it for like a 20-minute run or a 3-mile run. Make sure you're intertwining some walks in there just so we can see how your body feels. And then we also want to be monitoring for symptoms, not just during that running session, but following, the few hours following and all the way into the next day or two. So if you feel an increase of pelvic floor heaviness, an increase in incontinence, pain, achiness, all that kind of stuff, that's all things that we are looking for to see if your body can tolerate that run. So starting slow, progressing the intervals into higher work to rest ratios, making sure we're getting impact training drills, body functional, foundational strength training as well. All these things are going to play into returning to run. So that was question number 1. Question number 2 this week, I had somebody ask, what core stuff is quote unquote safe? She had ab mat sit-ups programmed at her CrossFit class, and she is 6 weeks pregnant, and she had previously not worked out during her other pregnancies. So she's being just really active and aware of stuff this time around and wants to make sure that she's doing things appropriately. So that is a great question to ask. However, one of my core goals as a pregnancy and postpartum trainer is to get rid of this safe versus non-safe verbiage. There is nothing inherently unsafe about exercise besides direct blunt force to the abdomen. Nothing else is going to harm your baby besides just something literally coming in direct contact with your belly. Let's say like you're plopping down, like belly down for a burpee, or like you're laying down for like a reverse hyper machine, like that kind of stuff just is going to feel icky anyways when you are far along in your pregnancy. When we're talking 6 weeks, like all movements are pretty much still in the game. And there's not a ton of even blunt force, not that you're ever going to try to directly like hit your belly. But even earlier on when like the baby is so far back in your pelvic cavity, like that's really the only thing that we are thinking about when it comes from safe versus unsafe language. So that is not the question. The question rather is, or what we care about rather, is working with our growing belly to help us stay as connected to our core tissues and muscles as they naturally thin, stretch, and elongate from pregnancy. And so the question, again, isn't what's safe versus unsafe, but more so like what is effective and appropriate versus not for the mom's core and pelvic floor health during pregnancy, but mainly during postpartum to help us recover those muscles in a more smooth and linear fashion, versus just like being reckless during our pregnancy and like purposely pushing pressure outwards, which would not help us. Wow. Sometimes I lose my words, which would not help us stay connected to those core muscles, which has a whole host of issues. So every mom is going to be different with what movements she feels stuff with and with what symptoms she's feeling. So for instance, like I had, gosh, I can't remember exactly how many weeks she was, probably between 20 and 28 weeks, like later in the second trimester. And she's like, I feel good doing GHD sit-ups still. I'm like, there's no way, like this is crazy. And so I had her do GHD sit-ups and she felt completely fine. I saw no coning. There was no feelings of pressure. She had no icky feelings. There was no strain. And so I was like, okay, like let's keep GHD sit-ups, and that's totally cool. The same mom then went and hung on a bar, but then she did feel those feelings of strain down the midline and like kind of icky feeling and just pressure forward. And so hanging bar movements, again, were not effective for her at that time, but GHD sit-ups she could still do properly without any issue. So everything is going to be highly individualized. Again, there's nothing core wise that is safe versus unsafe. It's more so what that movement is making your body feel at that certain point in your pregnancy. So there's no like at 10 weeks you have to remove sit-ups, or at 25 weeks you cannot plank anymore. It's very highly individualized. However, there are common movement patterns that seem to spark these symptoms of core strain, bulging, coning, doming, just getting you that icky feeling or that feeling of extra pressure down the midline. And they are all movements that indicate that the core wall is not able to control the pressure inside your core canister as your muscles get stretched and thinned during pregnancy. So the common movement patterns that are telling us that the demand is too high on our core wall would be sit-ups, or like any kind of core flexion where you're bringing your shoulders closer to your hips. Free bar hanging movement. So if you're on a rig and you're holding, hanging onto the bar, think pull-ups or toes to bar or hanging knee-ins or even just hanging dead hangs. And then third is plank. So these are the three common groupings of movements that they are very high core demand movements. That's why we train them outside of pregnancy and postpartum, because they are so good at strengthening your core. But as our core wall muscles and tissues thin and relax and elongate, it makes it harder for us to control pressure while doing these kind of movements during pregnancy and postpartum. So that's why we are seeing these symptoms a little bit more during those movement patterns. So first, before removing these movements, these core movements, I would first try to use strategies to maintain control during the movement. So think breath timing. So we're exhaling it and then having that proper core engagement. And then like that's prepping our body to then go into that movement. We're thinking of alignment. So rib cage over hips. And we're trying to pull our belly button back into our spine as we're doing sit-ups. And if that kind of stuff doesn't work, breath timing and proper core engagement, then we're trying to maybe reduce the range of motion. We're trying to stay more controlled or time under tension where there's less speed involved. Maybe we're decreasing the duration of like a plank hold per se. We're going for like 10 seconds instead of 30 seconds. And then if all that kind of strategies don't work, then we're going into thinking about external support. So I have had like a 35-week pregnant mom do banded sit-ups where we have a band wrapped around like a pole, and then she's using that as a way to pull back up after she goes back. And it felt really good and really relieving for her. And it helped her stay connected to her core. We didn't see any symptoms. So that is one way we can use some extra support. Or we can, like for a bar hanging movement, for instance, we can put a bench underneath her feet so that her knees are in front of her body. It helps her core stay more stacked, rib cage over hips, so that we don't feel that straining feeling of a dead hang, but we can still get that grip strength from the bar, or practice like half pull-ups. So there's other ways that we can use external support to keep those movement patterns in. But if all else fails, if we can't figure out any way to make the movement feel better, it might just be too high of a demand on the core, and that might be a sign to remove it then. So again, it's not about those movements being unsafe for pregnancy. It's how your body is able to adapt to those. And if if your body's unable to adapt to make those movement patterns feel good, then we would remove it from there. And it's going to be totally dependent on what those movements are, at what point in pregnancy they are, and what modifications are needed for each client. So I'll always tell moms, like, between weeks 10 and 20 is generally when your body will start to externally show your belly, or you'll start to feel yourself growing a little bit, which is always an exciting phase too. But I will not blanket statement remove any exercises, I will tell them like, hey, you're in the testing phase right now. I'm not going to take out any movements. I'm not going to give you any modifications or any, other options. I'm going to watch you, and you also kind of internally have these things to look for when you're doing exercises. And if you feel like something is too tough, it feels icky, you feel uncontrolled, then we'll start adapting exercise from there. So between weeks 10 and 20 is generally where we see a lot of the modifications, especially when it comes to core work. Number 3, and this is the last question of this podcast episode, kind of is a piggyback off of that one. And it was actually the same client who asked, like, what is safe versus unsafe? And then her part 2 of that question was, what do you sub those movements in for? So if there is a core move that feels uncomfortable or that does not feel great for your body, what are you supposed to do instead? And so substitutions can be different depending on your preference, what you want to work for or work on, and what you're looking to achieve in the workout that day itself. I'm going to use crunches and planks as examples. So if those start to feel like tough for you, here's some options. There's 3 different option buckets I like to think about. So first bucket is trying to match the movement itself. And this would be like your general way of modifying a movement. So instead of sit-ups, for instance, maybe we do a head lift with really intense breath work, or like really concentrated breath work. So we're doing a big inhale, exhale, and then we're just lifting that head. So we're, really focusing on the core engagement piece, our alignment, all that stuff. And then instead of planks, maybe we go into a hover plank where we're bringing our knees closer into our core wall or core midline, or maybe we do like a wall or an incline plank. So this is what we would think about as like traditional modifications to make the same movement easier or more tolerable for your body. So that is generally what people will think about as, like, again, modifications. That's the first bucket of what to do instead. And this goes along with anything, not just core moves, but any movement in general. Number 2 bucket is to do a similar movement pattern, but something that is more favorable for the pregnant body. So taking a crunch, for example, again, or a sit-up, maybe I would do a dumbbell standing crunch pull where we have a dumbbell in our hands and we're driving a knee up into the chest and bringing the dumbbell down at the same time. So we get a little bit lesser degree of flexion, but still a little bit. But then we're also working a little bit of balance, and we're working that knee drive, and we're working our hip flexors. So it's a little bit more favorable for the pregnant body because, again, we're not flexing as hard, but we're still getting some of that movement pattern, but we're also challenging other parts of our body that we need to train anyways. And then maybe for a plank, for instance, we're doing a peel-off hold. So we're having that band, we're holding it in front of us. Both of these are going to help keep the trunk more stacked, and it has less strain on the core wall too, to hold like a peel-off versus a plank. So these are ways that we are doing a similar movement pattern. We're still keeping it in the core category for this example, for instance, but it's going to be a little bit more favorable for the pregnant body overall. And then the third big bucket is, especially when we're thinking of things in a group setting, or if something is like specifically programmed for you outside of the pregnancy world, you can do something totally different for about the same time domain, or like a one-to-one trade-off that works with the workout. So for instance, crunches, instead of like trying to mirror a crunch, I might think of something that you can also do for reps that takes about the same amount of time. And I might replace crunches with body weight squats. They take about the same amount of time. So if we're talking like, 40 crunches in an AMRAP or something, or a chipper, maybe I do 40 squats instead. And it's a completely different exercise, but it helps you keep within the same time domain because the reps are kind of similar in pace. For a glute or for a plank hold, maybe I'll sub that in for like a glute bridge hold. So there's you got to think outside the box a little bit when you think of like modifications within a class setting. I'll even sub in like a cardio machine for a core move because the core is already working so hard throughout the day and it's already thinning and elongating. So a lot of times we don't have to do like a ton of core work during pregnancy, and we do generally move a little bit slower throughout our workout. So I do like using cardio machines as a core alternative sometimes, because it helps you keep your fitness capacity up and your fitness endurance, and then doesn't overload the core. On that same note, strength training is our primary way of training our core during pregnancy. It's not all of this like isolated core work. A lot of it is just from strength training. So that's why I like replacing core moves with another like maybe weighted or unweighted strength move, because it's going to be great for your whole body and won't just isolate the core when that system is already a little bit taxed. And then your whole body is staying strong and great. Anyways, so swapping for something totally different is an option too. Think of these as more of replacements and not so much as like modifications, but it's still an option if a movement, whether it be core move or something else, if that feels icky or symptomatic during pregnancy and we need to kind of find an alternative. So those are our 3 questions for the week: core substitution, exercises, what core stuff is safe, and then just a little bit of a review of returning to run postpartum. So hopefully those questions and answers are helpful to you. If you have any questions, I'd love to do more of these kind of question and answer style podcasts in the future. And with that, I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Mother Figures podcast. If these episodes help or resonate with you in any way, it would be so helpful to the show if you could leave a review so we can get this into more moms' hands. And if you're looking for even more guidance and direction when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum fitness, I got you covered. My Mother Figures app subscription includes my FIGR pregnancy and FIGR postpartum workout programs, in addition to our general fitness programs. You'll get the day-by-day workouts you need to help you feel strong, pain-free, and labor-ready during pregnancy, and also the recovery, strength, and progressions you'll need to get back to the activities you love, full of strength and without symptoms after baby arrives. If you're local to the Brighton, Michigan area, I also host daily women's functional fitness classes, a 6-week postpartum return to fitness course, and pregnancy and postpartum consultation sessions. For those who are providers, coaches, or practitioners in the space, I hold a live Mother Figures certification course that equips you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to train and work with this population. For information on all of these services and programs, make sure to check out fitisgettingreal.com/moms or head to the show notes for the direct link. I'm so thankful that you tuned in today's episode, and I will catch you next time.